This set of notes is on the Pythagorean theorem. The objective is to solve geometric applications involving the Pythagorean theorem. The Pythagorean theorem has tons of proofs, and many of them date back thousands of years ago. It is named after an ancient Greek philosopher, Pythagoras. Pythagoras actually had a secret society that followed a strict moral and ethical code. The theorem in general is written as a squared plus b squared equals c squared, and it describes the relationship between the legs and hypotenuse of a right triangle. In the Pythagorean theorem, the legs are represented by the variables a and b. It does not matter which you label a and which you label b, but both a and b must be legs of the right triangle. The variable c is always the hypotenuse. The hypotenuse is the longest side of the right triangle, and it is easy to locate because it is always across from the right angle, the 90-degree angle.
Look at a right triangle with a 90-degree right angle. Across from the right angles, the hypotenuse. It's no surprise the hypotenuse is the longest side. Now how do you find the hypotenuse's length if you know the length of the two other sides? Let's take you back to old ancient Greece. Pythagoras is gonna show you why. A squared plus b squared equals c squared, where c is the length of the hypotenuse. A squared plus b squared equals c squared, where a and b are the length of the other sides. The Pythagorean theorem is a delicate calculation. To find the hypotenuse, take the square root of the sum of the two other sides squared, and then compute. How do you find the hypotenuse's length if you know the length of the two other sides? Let's take you back to old ancient Greece. Pythagoras is gonna show you why. A squared plus b squared equals c squared, where c is the length of the hypotenuse. A squared plus b squared equals c squared, where a and b are the length of the other sides. A squared plus b squared equals c squared, where c is the length of the hypotenuse. A squared plus b squared equals c squared, where a and b are the length of the other sides.
Hopefully that catchy little song will help you remember the Pythagorean theorem. Let's look at a right triangle with legs that measure 5 inches and 4 1/10 inches. We need to find the length of the hypotenuse, so we need to first find the sum of the legs squared. 5 squared plus 4 1/10 squared is 25 plus 16 81 hundredths, which is 41 81 hundredths. Remember that this sum is equal to c squared. In order to solve for c, we need to take the square root. The square root of 41 81 hundredths is approximately 6 5/10. Therefore, the length of the hypotenuse is approximately 6 5/10 inches. Many of these problems, because they are applications, will not result in a perfect square radicand and require a calculator to get an answer. For our purposes in the notes, we will round to the nearest tenth when necessary. This time, let's look at a right triangle that has a leg measure of 15 centimeters and a hypotenuse measurement of 18 centimeters. Be careful in substituting your values into the theorem. Remember that the legs are represented by A and B, and the hypotenuse is represented by C. Therefore, you must plug in 15 for A or B. It does not matter which one, though. And you must plug in 18 for C. 15 squared is 225, and 18 squared is 324. Think back to your equation solving skills. You have to isolate the variable term next by subtracting 225 from both sides. This leaves us with b squared equals 99. Now, take the square root of 99 to get that b is approximately 9 9/10 centimeters. There are two problems on this page. The first is represented by the illustration of a right triangle with legs of length 6 inches and 8 inches. We need to find the hypotenuse. 6 squared plus 8 squared equals c squared. 36 plus 64 is c squared. The sum of 36 and 64 is 100. Now we need to take the square root of 100 to get c. This gives us that 10 equals c because the square root of 100 is 10. Therefore, the hypotenuse here is 10 inches. The second problem does not have an illustration. It may be helpful to draw one. Given a hypotenuse is 25 yards and a leg that measures 16 yards, find the measure of the missing side. So we are looking for this side right here. We can label that with a question mark. You are given the hypotenuse in a leg, so it means the missing side is the other leg. 16 squared plus b squared equals 225 squared. 256 plus b squared is 625. We now need to isolate the variable by subtracting 256 from both sides. This gives us b squared equals 369. Take the square root And using our calculator, we get that B is approximately 19 2/10 yards. Remember that the Pythagorean theorem is a squared plus b squared equals c squared. A and b represent the legs of a right triangle, and they are interchangeable in the formula. However, c always represents the hypotenuse, the longest side of the right triangle, which is always across from the right angle. Also, when using the Pythagorean theorem, keep in mind that it is only applicable to right triangles.